These are my obsession. Like, I love them. I adore them. I will read. Hello my loves, and thank you for joining me. It's Kirsten and we are talking about my favourite books ever. Now there are going to be some surprises, I think, of books that I don't talk about. So I do love a cozy murder mystery, however there are no cozy murder mysteries in this stack of books. Instead, this stack of books are slightly darker in tone. I think apart from maybe one, everything in this book tends to be a little bit darker and melancholic in a way. Those are the books that I love, that stick with me, that live rent-free in my brain. And cozy murder mysteries and other books that I have really enjoyed, but they don't quite hit this list of books. So let's just get straight into it. Let me know if you've read any of these. Let me know what some of your favourite books. Honestly, this was really hard to narrow down, I'm not gonna lie, but let's just get into it. I want to start off with one that I haven't actually fully finished yet, but it's one that I predict is going to be on this list once I finish it, and that is The Traitor Comant by Seth Dickinson. This is a book that I read half of initially. I'd taken it to America and then I saw these gorgeous beautiful editions and decided, you know what, I'm gonna buy the whole trilogy. I'm going to reread the first half that I read and I'm gonna have a fantastic time with it. I did start annotating my original copy that I had, but I love these editions. I really don't like the UK copies. I've never got round to rereading it and continuing on with this book because I just think it's going to be absolutely amazing. I don't know if anyone else does that, but you know a book is going to be so good that you're just saving it for the right time. And it's not good. Like, you should definitely just read them if you're going to enjoy them, but it's something that I do. But I'm reading this in the month of April. You're watching this video in April, but yeah, hopefully by the time this comes out I would have finished it, but I just think it's going to be on this list when I finished it, so I just wanted to mention it here. This one is a darker fantasy book. It's also an old one, and we're following Burrow, and Burrow's home has been conquered by this nation of peoples, and you see how they've slowly been doing it, slowly been eradicating her people's way of life to be implemented instead with the conqueror's way of life. Burrow vows revenge and works from the inside to bring about this retribution, and it is dark. Burrow does some terrible things. It's gonna be good. So yeah, so I predict this is gonna be a new favourite, which is why it's on here. So then we get into the rest of the books, and I have 14 books to talk to you about. The 14th book is kind of on the cusp. The rest of them after this are not in any particular order, but this is the 14th book, Notam de Par by Victor Hugo. And the reason why this one is on the cusp is because what I love about this book is 3 particular chapters, and these 3 chapters are chapters that were not included in some revised editions, were then added in, because they don't actually add anything to the story. They add nothing to the story. Instead, it's 3 chapters where Victor Hugo takes the liberty to talk about architecture in Paris, and how architecture was a way of expressing oneself, how you would use it to tell stories, and how beautiful it was, and how Victor Hugo was so worried that as we move forward and we become more technology advanced, that we're going to lose that individuality. And he was right. Everything has become what he thought it was going to be, where we just have grey square blocks of buildings, and it's so true. Those 3 chapters, I think about them all the time. Also, if you can hear some weird background noise, it's water in the pipes. It shouldn't be too bad. I notice it when I'm editing, so I just thought I'd mention it. But yeah, this book is really good. So this, if you know the Disney version of Hunchback of Notre Dame, it's much darker. That Disney film is based on this book, and we follow the same group of characters. You have the charming prince, who is not charming in this book. He is a soldier, but he is really quite horrible and self-absorbed and very quick to use people. We then have Esmeralda. She's had a bit of a hard past. She is then kind of stuck in this position where she loves the soldier's using her. Quasimodo, the hunchback, adores her, and the hunchback lives in Notre Dame. And then you have the evil monk. Honestly, there's a lot of evil priests. If you look at Gothic classic, priests are pretty much always the evil ones. This evil priest is obsessed with Esmeralda and is also the one that took in Quasimodo. It's a dark story. It is not a happy story. It is one of betrayal. It's dark and heartbreaking, and I think it was really good, but the parts that I loved about this were the 3 architecture chapters, and that's why it sits at 14, because if I adored the whole of the book the way I adored the architecture chapters, it would be in this where it's like I don't have an order of these favourites, they're all just amazing. As it is, it's those particular parts that I think about all the time, making this just on the edge of my favourite books ever. But I definitely want to read more by Victor Hugo. Obviously they done Les Miserables, which is a massive tome, but I really want to get to it. I did really like the writing, and I just think it was a beautiful story. So yeah, but those 3 chapters, oh, chef's kiss, were the best. Don't ask me why Architecture of Paris was what did it for me in that book, but it did. I just thought it was brilliant. But okay, now we're going to get into the rest of these 13 books in no particular order, but I'm going to start off with the ebook because I don't own a physical copy, and that is The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshni Shockley. This is a book I read very recently in February, and I just think it's going to be one that I think about for a really long time. Like, it was so beautiful, the writing was decadent, and you're going to see that as a common theme in this stack of books, but it was such a brilliant story. So we're following our narrator, who doesn't have a name. He is referred to as the bridegroom, and he talks about how he met his wife, about how she said to him, we can get married as long as you promise not to delve into my past. And it's a tale that is woven in with different mythology and folklore and fairy tales, and it is just so beautiful. I can really understand why it wouldn't be for everyone. It's very long-winded, it goes down its own little tangents and things, doesn't really seem to have a plot to it, but it was just gorgeous. And eventually you do get a second perspective, all ties into this man's wife. And what I really liked about this is how we never know the man's actual name. Kind of was a take on some of the other books like Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, where the main female character is never named, and it was just so good. The writing was stunning, I adored everything, and it was that combination of mythology and folklore woven seamlessly together that really just did it for me. It felt like a book that had been written just for me, because it had gorgeous Gothic writing. I love Gothic writing. I really enjoy mythology. As much as I burnt myself out last year on reading so much mythology altogether, I do love a good mythology retelling. I also adore stories that combine folklore and fairy tales. I love those sort of books, and this combined it perfectly and wrapped up in this gorgeous writing. So yeah, it was just perfect. It was a me book and I adored it. I definitely want to get a physical copy. I definitely want to annotate it. I got it on Kindle because it was on offer for 99p. I need a physical copy of this book. Like, I love it. I really want to reread and annotate it. Okay, right. Now all the physical books. These, again, no particular order. We have If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. This is a dark academia book and was the first book I fully properly annotated before I started getting really into it, as in like my first time fully using tabs. Like, I was using these tiny little thin tabs. Like, look how tiny these tabs are. They're so thin. I loved this book so much. This is a dark academia book set up in the traditional dark academia way. So you have the start of the story where we have our main character that was in prison for a murder, and you have him looking back on the events and what led up to the murder, and he's talking to a police officer who's like, I don't care if you did it or not, I just want to know what actually happened, what went on all those years ago. And so our main character Oliver is telling that tale. It is a tale of obsession. It is a tale of becoming so entrenched in something that you lose sight of what is morally correct. So we're following a group of theatre students, and they are at this very prestigious theatre school that only focuses on Shakespeare. That is all they do, and they are in, I think it's their final year, and you have this group of people that have been together throughout their years at university. They have been through so much together. It's a really hard course. Like, they become their own little cult in a way, and they talk to each other. Sometimes they throw out Shakespearean quotes and they use that to express themselves, because they've been so entrenched within this for such a long time. They've been acting out these parts for such a long time. It's become a part of them. I know some of the criticisms of this book is like, oh, it's not believable, but actually if you are that entrenched in something, it does become a part of your life. So for me, I did kind of find it believable. But you see that dark toxicity, the tangled webs of all their friendships, how some of it leans on hatred and the obsession with one another, and how quickly that can all devolve, and it was just so good. So I loved the Shakespearean influences. I really want to reread this and go through the different Shakespeare plays that were quoted, because I feel like those Shakespeare plays will also lend into what's happening in this book, and I know that when I reread this I'm going to get even more out of it and probably add more annotations. These are all books that I know that if I've reread them a couple of times, they're going to be so heavy with annotations and tabs and stuff. This was so good. I loved it. This to me is peak dark academia. It's what I want all my dark academia books to be like. It's fantastic. I love this. I love this more than The Secret History, which I know can be a controversial statement, but I do, mainly because The Secret History, there is a point in that book where I started to get a little bit bored, whereas this one I was just obsessed the whole way through. We then have My Dark Vanessa by Katie Elizabeth Russell. This is a book I have read 2 times now. So the first time I read this I never annotated before. The second time I read it I was at the point where I started underlining things. Since I've been annotating properly, as in like my version with tabs and stuff, I haven't read it again. So I definitely want to do a third reread with all the tabs. This is a really dark book, so this is not an easy read at all. It's definitely something you really have to be in the mindset for, because we are following Vanessa and she gets groomed by her English teacher. He uses Lolita as a love story, gives her a copy and is like, look, this is us. She believes it's a love story, but this is her story of looking back on the past at what happened, and also the present day where she's an adult now and she's going through therapy and dealing with what went on and coming to terms with the fact that this was not a love story. This was a story of manipulation and somebody abusing their position of power. So it is a really dark and difficult story to read, but I constantly think about it. Like, it's one that, like I said, I've reread a couple of times. I will reread again. It's a hard one to talk about, but it's so well done. Like, it seems weird for me to say that such a dark book is so well done and like I love it so much, but it is, and I do, and I think it's really good. But it's not one I would necessarily recommend to anyone. It's the same with all of these. I wouldn't necessarily recommend all these books to absolutely anyone. Most of them are a little bit darker, but yeah, that is definitely one that's stayed with me, as I'm going to say for all of these. Okay, this one I would actually recommend to everyone. This is A Natural History of Dragons, a memoir by Lady Trent, and this is by Marie Brennan. I love this. This is the light book out of all of these other books. This is Jane Austen meets dragons. We are following Lady Trent and she is writing the memoirs and she is looking back on her life, and it is set during that time period, like Jane Austen time period, where women are expected to do certain things. They have these sensibilities that they're meant to deal with. You know, Lady Trent is going against that. She wants to be a naturalist. She wants to study dragons, but this is not seen as a feminine pursuit. She gets relegated to the role of, well, you need to marry and have kids. You can be an artist, but you can't be a scientist. But she eventually manages to get her way onto an expedition out to see some dragons. It is a scientific expedition. The only way she gets to do that is by being their artist, even though she's so smart, even though she understands all these things that are going on. But she manages to make a name for herself and is then able to spend the rest of the books being able to go out and do these different explorations. I have read the first 3 books in this series. I keep delaying reading the 4th one because of how much I love this series. It's so good. I spoke about it recently. It was in my underrated books video as well. It has been getting some recent love, which is great, but I just adore this. It is so well done. I like the characters. I like the setting. I like how each book focuses on something slightly different. It's just so good. And this type of book, a recipe that I just really adore, and it doesn't matter how many times it gets done in how many different ways, but I love it. Like, I spoke about it with the Veronica Speedwell series, that I was like, I could definitely give you a list of book recommendations that are like that, and this would be one of them, because it's just got that combination. It worked really well. I love it. This particular series has some gorgeous illustrations in, because as I said, Lady Trent starts off as an artist for these expeditions, and so you do get illustrations that she has done that depict different things that they're seeing at the time. It could be of places, it could be of different dragons they're seeing. I really like it because it just adds to the reading experience. It's a great series. Back to the darker themed books, we have You Let Me In by Camilla Bruce. This is another recent read, one that my mum got for me, and I adored this one. It looks at, again, a really dark past. So it's, the setting of this is we're following this niece and nephew of Cassandra. Cassandra has been missing for a year, and she's like, for you to claim my inheritance, you need to read this manuscript. It's in her will, and she has left the manuscript at her house for them to come and read, and that is what we're reading. And Cassandra is writing it to them, so it talks to you as if you are the niece and nephew. And it's a story where Cassandra is explaining what actually happened in her childhood, because she has been accused for murder twice. Her sister, so their mother, believes that, oh no, she definitely did those, and she's like, here's my truth. And I really like this. It is dark, it questions what is truth, it questions what is reality. You could have two different sides to this. So on one side you have someone that was a very young girl who was mistreated by her parents in really horrible ways. Her brain protected itself by coming up with this version of events. And then you have the other side to this, which is she was trapped within fae and folklore, and while her family life was never good, she never got on with her mum, it wasn't the way others have said it was, because she ended up in therapy, and she's just like, that was his truth, this is my truth, and my truth has the fae and folklore woven into it, and it is beautiful, it is dark, it is twisty and turny. It really leaves it up to you to decide what's true. And Cassandra does say towards the end, why can't both be true? Why can't both versions of this be true? Why does there have to be just one absolute truth? Why does it have to cancel each other out? And it's beautiful, it's so well written, it's really dark, not an easy read at times, but it is just beautiful. I loved the writing style. As I said earlier, I love books that incorporate folklore and fae, and it does that really, really well. I loved it. Definitely a book I want to annotate. When I first read it, I started it and then I got halfway through and I was like, oh, I really want to annotate this, but I also can't bother to go back through the first half. I was like, I know I'm going to reread this, I will annotate it then. The next book isn't as dark as some of the other ones, but it still touches on a couple of darker themes, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I adored this book, and I am so desperate to reread this one. It's one that I want to reread this year. This is just so fantastic. The writing is gorgeous. This is my favourite V. Schwab book. Like anything, it's going to be decisive because it's so different to all of V. Schwab's other work, but this was just gorgeous. So we're following Addie, and she makes a pact with this kind of demon-like creature because she does not want to get married. She's being forced into this marriage. It's set way in the past. And so he's like, okay, sure. I can free you from this. I can give you freedom. But what he doesn't tell her is the catch, and that is no one's ever going to remember her. She will walk out of a room and people will forget her existence. She lives a life of being a ghost. She is immortal, and you see her life. So you have two kind of timelines going on. One is the past, and it's got more time jumps going on, and you just see snippets of her life, the things that she has had to deal with in the reality of a life where no one can remember you, and making the best of that. And she gets into some really difficult situations, and parts of it are quite dark and sad. Then you have the present timeline, and she meets somebody that remembers her, and at first she's like, what, how does this why is this happen, what? And then you start seeing their story progress, and the ending is so sad. Like, the ending is so bittersweet, but it is a beautiful book with some gorgeous quotes. I adored this one. I actually have 2 copies of this book. So this is the UK hardback edition. It is gorgeous. It has really nice end pages and foiling under the jacket. It is a lovely book. However, I have a separate copy which is the US edition, and that's the edition I want to annotate in because it's just a little bit more floppy and there's more room to annotate in that edition. So I desperately want to reread that book, and I really want to do it soon. This is such a gorgeous book. The writing is decadent. I mean, again, I'm going to use that word a lot. It is so gorgeous, the writing, and the themes that it touches upon. It talks about what is life if no one remembers you. Do you have a life if you can't have any relationships or connections with others? Like, how do you navigate that? And I love it. It talks about loneliness and loss, trying to find yourself, and it is beautiful. So yeah, I adored this book. It is really slow moving, slow paced. It takes its time with everything, but the themes and the way it discusses them are just expertly done. So yeah, my favourite Readingearthnymph book and a favourite of all time. Again, another fantasy book that isn't that dark really, but it does deal with some slightly darker things. It's not something that I would go, oh, this is a light-hearted book. So this is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norl by Susanna Clarke, and look at the size of this. It is chunky. This was my favourite book from 2022. I read it in January and it stayed my favourite book across the whole year. The way this book is written is so interesting as well. So you have the story of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norl. Mr. Norl is a magician and he is a cantankerous old person and he does not want to share magic. He thinks magic should be hoarded and should not be allowed to be used willy-nilly. And then you have Jonathan Strange, who ends up as his apprentice, who values magic very differently and is very much like, no, we need to use this to help people. There's a lot that goes on. We have the Napoleonic Wars in here where they end up playing a part. You get the politics of the time that's going on. It is set in England primarily, and it's just this tale of these two magicians, and there are parts where it is so slow. It's like watching paint dry, but those are the parts of Mr. Norl's perspective, and it fits with who Mr. Norl is. Mr. Norl, like I said, is this cantankerous person. He likes to hoard, he doesn't like to share, he is a very, very dry person, and so when you're reading his perspectives, it is a bit of a slog, but it's so well done. And then you have Jonathan Strange's perspectives, and he's so young and energetic, and he's a bit all over the place, a bit chaotic, and his chapters reflect that. But alongside that, you have footnotes in here, and the footnote, they are sometimes little things from like a little sentence where it's just expanded upon something or commenting on a book that they've read from. There's other points where the footnote is a whole story into itself, and that's where we weave in the folklore of this, and I adore it. I adore everything about this book. It is beautiful. So it's set in 1806. I love it. I love it so much. I really want to reread it. I want to annotate it. This is just gorgeous. It does also have illustrations in. It's just beautiful. I love the way everything combined. And again, the ending is not a happy ending. It's a bit of a bittersweet ending, but it is gorgeous. It is my favourite book. If someone goes to me, what's your favourite fantasy book? I'm going to say this, Addie and The Natural History of Dragons. They are my top three, and depending on what mood I'm in will depend on which one I'm going to give you. If I'm in a lighter, more bubbly mood, it'll be A Natural History of Dragons. If I want something that I'm like, actually, you know what, I'm in the mood for a really good chunky, it's this. And honestly, out of the three, this is the one that kind of tops it for me. It's just so good, and that's with moments where I'm like, this was the slowest slog to get through, but it was just brilliantly done. It was expertly done. I love this book. I really want this particular edition of this book that is stunning that just isn't out anymore, and I'm so tempted to try and find a copy, but I know it would be so expensive. This is gorgeous. I love Susanna Clarke's writing style. They're one of my favourite authors. I mean, I could do a whole separate video on favourite authors, and then that would actually be different to this list, but one that wouldn't be different is this book, because I love Susanna Clarke's writing. I love everything that was done with this book. It is gorgeous, and yes, it's a big ass tome. It's like almost 1,000 pages long, but it's worth it. I loved every moment of this. It was fantastic. Okay, we get into the last few, and now we're in for quite a few Gothic classics, because classics are a favourite of mine. I'm not gonna lie, I love classics. I don't read them often because I have to be in the mood for them, as with a lot of these books. These are not the sort of books that I'm going to read all the time, because as much as I adore them, as much as I know that 9 times out of 10 they're going to be absolutely amazing and perfect and everything I want, I don't want to be reading that all the time. I want to have the lighter books thrown in, but when I'm ready for it and when I'm in the mood for it, oh, there is no stopping me. I love them. But one of the books, not quite Gothic fully, Thomas Hardy, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and this knocked out Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. So Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte used to always be in this list. However, this has knocked it out the park. Thomas Hardy has become my favourite classic author, which is a big thing to say, but I've read a couple of his books and I have just adored them. Tess of the D'Urbervilles was the first book I read, and it is depressing and it's melancholic and it's not the happiest thing going, but I loved it. I loved everything about this. I loved the descriptions of nature. I loved the way he portrayed society and questioned it. I love the story of this. So we're following Tess, and Tess's family is really, I mean, they're in poverty, they're not doing very well. Tess ends up in a situation that for a woman during this time is not a good situation to be in. She gets used by this man, and it's really, really sad. She ends up on this farm and she wants to just, you know, build this peaceful life for herself, but because of the cruel treatment of this man that befell her, she struggles with that. She has to hide it all. Eventually she finds this other person that she loves, but this is not a happy story. This is a dark, depressing story, but it is so beautiful. I loved the depictions of nature, as I've already said, like gorgeous. I expect that from Thomas Hardy's writing, and he doesn't fail to deliver every single time. It's just so well done. The way he describes the English countryside is just beautiful. I adore it. And then, like I said, the comments on society in here, it talks about how women have to dress themselves, how they have to act in society, how society is hypocritical and it doesn't make sense and it goes against nature and it shouldn't be this way. It is a beautiful book. It is hard hitting. It deals with some darker things, but it's fantastic. So yeah, I love this. I love Thomas Hardy. Then we have Dracula by Bram Stoker, which of course I love. I've reread Dracula a couple times. I adore it. I haven't annotated it. I mean, I did annotate this. I did underline things, but I haven't tabbed it. I haven't done the level of annotating that I've done. This one is actually, this edition was gifted to me by Eric, and I read this one. I took it on holiday to Thailand in October 2022, and this was so good. Like, I loved it. I mean, like I said, it was a reread, and it's a book that I can continue to reread and continue to find things that I love about it. So Dracula by Bram Stoker, I mean, most people know what it is. Like, it is an absolute classic. It is the vampire classic story. It's not the first vampire classic story. I've done a whole video on vampires in literature. If you would like watch it, you can. But it is so good, and it's memorable for a reason. Like, it is beautiful. It's done in letters, journal entries. The formatting of this book I really enjoyed. We have multiple different perspectives, but I suppose the main couple of perspectives, you have Mina and Jonathan Harker. So Jonathan Harker at the start of this story is going to Transylvania to meet with Dracula. He's going there to finalize, say, a sale of some property, but while he is there, he discovers the dark secret that is hiding within this castle, and it is so decadent. It's gothic. It is beautifully written. It's got lots of different dark, sensuous things. We're following Dracula as he makes his journey from Transylvania to London. We're then following Jonathan and Mina as they seek the help from a few different people that to try and vanquish this monster. It is a brilliant book. Every time I read it, I get something else from this book. It is such a fantastic book. Like, it is brilliant. Honestly, I don't know what else I can tell you. It's a fantastic book. I would recommend you read it if you like classic, if you like horror, if you just want to see where the vampire craze came from. I mean, like I said, it's not the first book, but it's the one that kind of spurred on the momentum. It's brilliant. It is so good. And of course, how can I not mention Frankenstein by Mary Shelley if we're talking about gothic classic? I love this book. Again, it's one I have read a couple times. Again, I've underlined things, but I haven't tabbed it. That's, again, before I was doing all of that, but this was a brilliant book. Again, one I recommend, one that you've heard about so many times. It is brilliant. It pioneered a kind of genre in a way, the start of exploring these different themes within literature. Frankenstein, a lot of people think Frankenstein refers to Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein's monster was never named. Frankenstein is Victor Frankenstein, the mad scientist that created him. This is a story about loss. It is a story about trying to turn back fate, how someone can become so obsessed with something that it impinges on their morality. It ends up causing hubris, and we try and play with the line between life and death. I would say, and I mentioned it before in my Dark Academia video, that this also is kind of the start of Dark Academia, showing you how someone can become so obsessed with something and what it can lead to at such a detrimental effect. Because again, a lot of this does actually take place while Victor Frankenstein is in university. That's what he becomes obsessed with, is learning about electricity, about the human body, about this line, as I said, between life and death, and he is striving to overcome this, but again to such a detrimental effect, and he creates this monster and then takes no responsibility for what he's done. And then of course things come about because of that, and it's also got the nature versus nurture argument in here of raising somebody. Then see the perspectives of this poor monster who has no name, who has been brought into life by this creator who then wants nothing to do with him, has shunned him, is then left to fend for themselves, and it's such a heartbreaking tale. And Victor Frankenstein frustrates me so much because he just hasn't taken responsibility for his actions, for the things that he has done. As a result of his hubris, these terrible acts have come about. So as you can tell, I really like this book. I have a lot of opinions on it. I don't really like Victor as a character, but I love the way Mary has taken all of this and explored it, and is using Victor to explore it in his thirst for life over death and being able to conquer it. I do feel really sorry for the monster in this. It is heartbreaking. It's a fantastic book. There is so much that's been packed into it. Then we have Oscar Wilde's Picture of Dorian Gray, but specifically the uncensored version. So I have read the uncensored version and I have read the censored version, which is the one that is more commonly published. Like, that's the one that you're going to get if you go into a shop and it says the Picture of Dorian Gray. It is the censored version. The uncensored version, the only edition is like this. You have to actually search for it. I found it through a bookshop online, which is queerlit.uk. This made all the difference. So the reason why it was censored is because of particular chapters in here at the time were seen as too explicit, seen as too dangerous in a way to have published, and so they had to censor it. And in the censored version, a lot of people complain because there is a chapter in there which is really hard to read, and it's a slog, and it feels really different to the rest of the book. That is the chapter that Oscar Wilde had to write to put in instead of what was in here. It was a big change, but this is gorgeous. I love it. If you're going to read The Picture of Dorian Gray, read the uncensored version. Do yourself a favour. It's fantastic. It is absolutely gorgeous. I love this. So if you don't know what this is about, we are following Dorian Gray, who becomes manipulated by this person that he meets. He is very young, he is beautiful and handsome, and he ends up falling in love with his looks and wanting to stay young forever, and kind of ends up making this pact. He will stay young forever, but the portrait that is being painted, well, that is going to show all of his sins, all of his aging, everything will be in that portrait, but nothing will touch him. It is a gorgeous book. Again, it talks about different things within society. It looks at what it is to be young and beautiful forever and that vanity, but it also looks at the darker temptations and what it does to your soul, and his portrait is showing that. It is showing the ravages of his soul. It is decadent. We also have a love story, a bit of an obsession that goes on here. We have murder. It's brilliant. It's a fantastic book, but as I said, I recommend the uncensored version every single time, not the censored version. I preferred the reading experience of the uncensored version so much more to the censored version. Like, the censored version would never have been in this list of books. The uncensored version is hands down, will always be. I love that book. Okay, the last two books, we have The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides. This was a brilliant book. It's also a bit weird. It's oddly written. We are looking at these 5 girls. We have these 5 sisters who one by one start committing suicide, and we're looking at it from the perspective of a group of people that have put together this museum of sorts because they were enamored and obsessed with these girls. So it talks as if you, the reader, are visiting this museum, and they lay out the different images that they've got, and they're showing you around this museum and telling you the story of these 5 girls. As a result, you don't know what's actually going on in the girls' head. You don't know how they actually feel, what's actually going on behind closed doors. You just know what they have witnessed, what this group of boys have witnessed, and their obsession with the girls. So this is really unreliable because you don't know if what is actually going on is the truth or not, what's actually leading to things. But what they do know is that these 5 girls, their mum is highly religious, she is very strict, she has strict things that she will allow the girls to do or not to do, and it ends up causing the girls to be outcasts of society and then eventually leading to their suicides one by one. It is a tragic story, it is dark, it's weird and unusual, and like I say, you can't trust what is being told because you don't know what actually went on because they don't know. You just see their obsession they had with these girls, and you know how weird that obsession actually is. But it's a fantastic book. It's one I want to reread. I picked it up because of the cover. This was a cover buy. Then I read the back, which only this bit, which was that girl didn't want to die. She just wanted out of that house. She wanted out of that decorating scheme. And that intrigued me enough to pick it up, and I've loved it. I read this a little while ago now. When did I read this? Did I put it in here? Oh, I read this in June 2022, so I'm definitely due a reread. This, again, I've underlined things. I have folded the bottoms of pages. So when I was first starting to annotate, I would just underline and then fold pages of different quotes that I really enjoyed, but at the bottom. Now, obviously, I do tabs and things, so I definitely want to reread this and tab it because I think it's going to be fantastic. This was really good. I adored this. I really liked the different things it was exploring, and I think I have quite a good theme of Gothic literature, toxicity, obsession, and exploring that seems to really work for me. And the final book is Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice, and you can see how all of my favourite books are going to end up looking, because look at these tabs. Oh, this is gorgeous. So I read this last year. It ended up being my favourite book of the year, and it is an ultimate favourite book. I adore this so much. So we are following Louis, and Louis is telling his story to this reporter about how he became a vampire and everything that has ensued since then. It is a tale of lust, seduction, being a vampire, the darkness of humanity, the way we can want things, and it's just gorgeous. I have so many annotations, and honestly there are more that I could do. So the ones that I started off, we've got quotes that I love, obviously. I've got a tab for relationships, not just romantic but also friendship. We have death and the passion of drinking blood. We've got discussions on morality and humanity. We've got social commentary and references to Dracula. There is another tab that I want to do in here when I reread it, and that is all about this young girl that we meet and the way she is portrayed, the way she is treated. Fantastic. It is gorgeous. I loved this book so much. This is a reading experience I will never forget. I want to continue on with the series. I don't have as high hopes for the rest of the series. Some people say the next book is their favourite, some people say it's not, but I think the general consensus is after the second book things start going downhill. I don't care, because this book has been so freaking fantastic that even if I didn't like the next book, I don't care. This was brilliant. I adored everything about it. It is my favourite book of all time. It's so good. Like, I think out of all of this is probably my favourite out of that whole list. It was just brilliant and incorporated so many things that I love. It's got beautiful writing, absolutely gorgeous. It's got the Gothic literature side of things. It's got the social commentary. It's got everything that I want from a book this had. It was brilliant, and I will always talk about it. I will always want to reread it. I loved it. I loved it so much, every moment of it. So these were all the books that are my absolute favourite books ever. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, and I'm hoping editing me has been able to make this a bit more streamlined, but this has been the hardest video to film for me. There's been lots going on in the background, so I'm really sorry if you've had any random background noises and things. I'm gonna try and do what I can for it, but this was the only day I had to film this, so I apologise. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this. I love talking about these books because they're all books that I am just obsessed with. Like, these are my obsession. Like, I love them. I adore them. I will reread them. I will find new things to talk about. I probably delve too deeply at times into them, but I love everything about all of these books. So yeah, please let me know if you've read any of these, if you agree with me on any of these, or what some of your favourite books are. Let me know all of that in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. I think if you've made it this far, then we need to have a little blood drop emoji for Interview with the Vampire, because it's just fantastic. So if you have made it this far, you don't know what to comment, then just leave a little blood drop, but I am going to leave it there. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate each and every single one of you that takes the time to watch these videos. If you have enjoyed it, then please remember to give it that thumbs up, subscribe, comment. That really helps this channel out, so thank you so much. My social media links and anyone I've mentioned will all be linked below for you, and I will of course catch you in the very next video.